Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. We got -185 for Moreno and +160 for Raw Dog Royval. And the fight doesn't go to decision. Props just recently dropped, and we got +115 on the fight to not go to decision. So let's actually start off with the newer UFC fighter, Brandon Royval, who's had 2 UFC fights now, and he's gone 2-0. Both fights super entertaining. The Tim Elliott fight, a back and forth scrambling, grappling exchange, pretty much all 8 minutes of that fight, 8 minutes and 18 seconds specifically. And we see, Tim Elliott kind of gas himself out almost. Not even gas himself out, but like Royval pushes such a chaotic pace that it almost forces opponents to gas out. So Tim Elliott succumbed to that, was going for a bunch of submissions, wasn't able to pull them off against Royval, and then Royval eventually gets that arm triangle choke midway through the second round. Then the Kai France fight, absolute bonkers fight where that first exchange, one of those first exchanges where Kai France lands a beautiful shot on Brandon Royval. Royval looks okay, but then he takes a step forward, kind of stumbles. We see Kai France kind of lunge forward and try to take advantage, and we see fucking Royval throw a beautiful spinning back elbow, lands perfectly on Kai France and drops him too. One of the crazier exchanges that we're going to see all year. But Royval is just all action all the time. The guy just does not stop moving forward. His cardio is off the chain. His jiu-jitsu is off the chain too. And he may not be as credentialed as much as a guy like Jussier Formiga, that's Moreno's last opponent. But I still think he could possess some threats here to Moreno in that jiu-jitsu realm. I love Raw Dog. I love his style. I like to call him Mini Ferguson because a lot of people are kind of comparing him to Nate Diaz, and I don't really understand that. Like, it's clear that he's more like Tony Ferguson in terms of just being so chaotic, not really having the greatest striking techniques or striking mechanics, but still going out there and throwing like solid shots down the middle, solid kicks, spinning shit, and then his jiu-jitsu is just pretty offensive at all times. So it's super fun to watch the kid fight. This is a super tough fight for his third fight in the UFC. Even the Kai France fight, that was the second fight in the UFC for him, and he came in as a +170 dog. I remember cashing on that too. That was one of my prouder moments this year as well, because everybody's like, yo, Kai France is going to go out there and just starch this kid. He has nothing on the feet. But the issue with Kai France is, just as we saw in the Brandon Moreno fight, is when somebody brings the fight to him and isn't just accepting of the fact that Kai France is just going to lunge in every now and then and land a couple shots and get out of the way, guys that can push the pace against him kind of can create chaos, are way more successful against Kai France, which is why I think that Royval was, I think he's a little bit more chaotic than Brandon Moreno, which is why Royval was able to get the finish there. Beautiful jumping guillotine that he was able to secure on Kai France. It was hilarious because Kai, clearly going for the takedown, and it, technically as a wrestler, he did the right thing in terms of trying to like pick up Royval, and they usually, it's weird that the wrestlers do this, but they usually expose their neck to allow to create more force and generate more power when you take an opponent down. But that was the exact time that Brandon Royval was like, oh, you're going to give me your neck? He's going to snatch it up, get, kind of drag Kai France to the ground with that choke, and then just readjust his footing to get a little bit more pressure on that choke, a little bit more torque, and he was able to get the submission there. So that was a beautiful choke and shows that he is pretty much ever dangerous. Now in this fight against Brandon Moreno, somebody actually pointed it out, on my Twitter when I was talking about I'm super excited for this fight. They said that Brandon Moreno is kind of a slightly better version of Brandon Royval, and I kind of agree. My issue here, though, is what happens when Moreno deals with chaos just as he creates chaos, right? If not more. Like I said, Royval is just so good at just, pushing fighters and getting them to make mistakes. Moreno is kind of the same way too, but I think just slightly more controlled chaos than what Brandon Royval brings to the table. Like, we've seen a true resurgence from Brandon Moreno compared to when he originally came into the UFC after The Ultimate Fighter. If I'm not mistaken, he only had 1 or 2 fights outside of the UFC before he came back. So his last fight in the UFC was a loss to Alexandre Pantoja, goes out there and beats Michael Perez in round 4 at LFA 69. I believe that was for a title, hence the 4 rounds there. And then he comes right back to the UFC and draws against Askar Askarov in a fight where a lot of people thought that Askarov would go out and win. Arguably, you could say that Brandon Moreno won that fight too. And I had money on Askar Askarov. I thought he was going to go out there and dummy Moreno, but we did see a lot of improvements from him. And then in the Kai Car-France fight, that even more cemented that, okay, this is a new version of Moreno. He goes out there, throws wacky strikes, throws this unorthodox striking style that he has, but he still has the jiu-jitsu to go out there and back that up too. The commentators were kind of mystified that he wasn't taking Kai down, and as the fight started to play out, you kind of understand why. He has this weird style of, it's kind of unorthodox, but he has this stinging jab, beautiful jab right down the middle, but his movement is very unorthodox. Likes to throw a lot of weird shit, has some good kicks as well too, and I love this evolution that we've seen from Moreno. In the Juicy Formiga fight, another fight that kind of cemented the progress and the improvements that Moreno is making. To go out there and outstrike Formiga the way he did, to go out there and get the better of some of the scrambles against a super high level jiu-jitsu guy like Formiga, spinning out of the back. Formiga had his back a couple times there, and he did a really good job of scrambling out of those positions and then getting on top. Yeah, there were some hairy situations, kind of even like the last minute of the 3rd round, where Formiga pretty much had the full mount but was not able to really land enough. And I think he was just too scared to kind of peel himself off of Moreno to land some damage or look for a submission, because he was scared that Moreno would go out there and just scramble and create chaos like I'm talking about. That's a theme of this breakdown, because both guys, Moreno and Royval, are masters of creating chaos and kind of capitalizing on that. So I think Formiga was a little bit too scared to really let go in that last minute. He wanted to secure the position and thought that would have been enough to actually get the judge's decision. Turns out unanimous for Moreno. But if you look at MMA decisions, there's a lot of fans and even media that were very split on this fight. Personally, I thought Moreno did enough to win that fight. The Kai Car-France fight was probably his best work to date. But to get a victory over Formiga the way that he did was very, very impressive. Now, I'm staying away from this fight in terms of picking a side here, but I wouldn't be mad at picking the under 2.5 if that's actually what it drops at. I'm pretty certain that's what it will drop at. The fight doesn't go to decision is currently plus 115, which makes me believe that the under 2.5 will probably be around plus 125, plus 130, and I wouldn't mind that spot here given the style of both of these guys. My read is the fact that Moreno will probably be crisper on the feet, landing the better shots on the feet, but when it does get to the chaotic parts, I don't know. I feel like I lean Royval in that situation a little bit more. Moreno is a brown belt, but and even Juicy Formiga, the way that Moreno dealt with Formiga and got out of those situations, I feel as though that Royval puts himself into more danger when we're talking about the jiu-jitsu aspect, and doesn't mind, doing a couple things that maybe aren't technically the correct things to do, but still the things that will allow him to to create winning opportunities for himself. So the pick is going to be Moreno, because I do agree with what that person on Twitter said, that Moreno is probably the slightly better version here, especially on the feet. But I'm not willing to pay minus 185 on Moreno, especially against a guy like Royval, who in my opinion is ever improving and is just such a wild card. Like, you really don't know what you're truly going to get with this guy. But I love, well, you do know what you're going to get with him, and that's chaos. But I love Moreno in this spot. I'm a huge Raw Dog fan. I'm gonna be cheering for him here. But in terms of a bet, you gotta set aside the biases. I don't think that there's enough. There's just not enough confidence on my side that Moreno is that much better than Royval. Like, if this fight was closer to maybe a minus 120, minus 130 for Moreno, I'd be a little bit more, inclined to make that Moreno bet. But I think the bet here could potentially be the under 2.5. So that's what I'll be keeping my eye out for once those lines start to drop. So I do like Moreno to win this fight. I'll say maybe second round sub or second round TKO. But this is a close fucking fight. It would not surprise me in the least bit if Royval pulled off the victory here. So In terms of picking a side, like I said, once again, I'm not picking a side, at least betting wise. But for predictions, that's what you guys are here for. I will go with Moreno. But in terms of a bet, I think the side that is best would probably be the under 2.5, as I believe Royval is just crazy. Even Moreno too. Like this fight could have the potential to be fight of the year, and I can't wait for that. In terms of like finishes and getting finished, like how many fight doesn't go to decisions have cash for Royval. Let's go over that real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 out of 16 fights for him, and then for Brandon Moreno, let's get that real quick. I'm not sure why Tapology doesn't really have the complete method of victories in their earlier careers. But even for Moreno, never been finished, so that's something to keep in mind here. So Royval is going to have a tough time to finish this guy. But I think if there is anybody that could finish Moreno, it's probably Royval with his chaotic style. But Moreno has won via finish 12 out of 17 victories. So again, I do like the under 2.5, given both their styles and the way that Royval just continuously brings the fight against his opponents, and Moreno's ability to, or ever improving abilities as well, in Moreno. But yeah, this fight is crazy. I can't stop talking about it. It's probably going to be one of my longer breakdowns for this card because I'm so psyched for it. I think it's a very high level fight, and essentially, it's actually the number one contender fight for the main event here. Easily, you could throw in Moreno or Royval, given whoever wins the main event here. So, yeah, very, very high stakes fight, high level fights, and high probability that it could produce us the fight of the year contender here. So, once and for all, we'll go with Moreno to win this fight, be a second round TKO or sub. But the under 2.5 is probably the side that I'm leaning the most in terms of a bet.